Hi there, Nigel Saunders here of KW Bonsai. Today we're going to be working on my Acacia seedlings. These seedlings aren't even a year old, yet they have woody trunks and they're starting to look like trees already. Here's a close-up of the trunk. You can see they're getting quite large and woody. In the last video, I cut the top off the seedlings, so I would go from one trunk dividing into at least two. And most of the trees have done that. And I've been pruning the tops of the new shoots to kind of equalize the balance between the two new leaders, so one doesn't take off and become a new trunk and the other one will get weak and die off. So I've been balancing the growth. They're ready for another pruning, and today we're going to be repotting them and creating a new kind of rock landscape. Ever since I started growing these acacia trees, I've been fascinated by some of the African landscapes. What I really like is some of the rock formations in Africa, where you see like a pile of rocks out in the middle of nowhere. And I want to duplicate that in miniature. With my sarissa tree that's styled like an African acacia tree, I do have sort of a rock formation at the back, but in this planting I want to expand on that and make a really nice rock formation. And I'll show you some of those images that I have collected so you can kind of see the look that I'm after. I'm going to be creating the landscape in this terracotta shallow under tray dish. This normally goes under a big pot to catch the overflow. And I've drilled holes in the bottom so it drains well, and it's a nice shallow pot to create a landscape in. This won't be the final pot, but it's a good training pot to get the landscape underway. In the pots of my acacia trees, I have two different kinds of acacias. Nico sent me the sweet thorn seeds, and Michael got me the fever trees. So the fever trees have a lighter color trunk, and the sweet thorns have a darker color trunk. The roots on these seedlings haven't been touched since they were planted, so one of the main objectives of today will be to remove the taproot on the root system and get a fibrous root system underway. When I cut back the trees in the last video, I did get one that died. So that wasn't too bad. I mean, you're always going to get some that don't make it, especially when you do some fairly drastic operations. So I'm going to start getting these trees out. We'll do one pot at a time. So here we go. On all three pots, the roots have grown out the bottom drainage holes, so you can see them here. So the roots have grown quite well over less than a year. So I've got to get these out. I'm going to try pulling on the actual trees. That seems to be working. It gets the little thorns hurt. It gets the whole pot out as a group. And they have a smell, these acacias. It smells like bean soup or something. I guess it's because, I don't know, they just have a cool smell to them. So there's my massive roots, and I'm going to start combing. So the soil is still very porous and quite dry and crumbly. The sweet thorn acacias like the soil to be drier, and the fever trees like moist soil. So that's another reason I'm separating the two trees, is that I can kind of water them better. I can give the fever trees more water and the sweet thorns less. So you can see we do have some fine roots, but mainly the roots go down into a big taproot. And this is part of the survival of any dry tree or any tree, is they have various roots that some are on the surface and some go deep into the soil to get moisture. So I'm going to try and separate the trees now. Oh, there's quite a mass of roots in the bottom here. Wow. Maybe I should have been watering them more. It looks like all the roots have gone to the bottom of the pot, which is definitely a sign that they need more water. This one has 2 tap roots. Just going to separate them here. Wow, they're really tangled in there. There we go. There's one tree separated. It'll be interesting to see what roots are on these cuttings that I stuck in the soil. Let's try and get those out first if we can. There we go. So, doesn't seem to be any roots on that one. Or that one either. No roots on the cuttings, but they're growing. Interesting. Well, we'll have to replant them and see if they continue to grow. The rest of the trees will have roots for sure. I've got my drainage screens positioned in the pot, so now I can start to add some soil. So I'll just hold the drainage screens down. The soil is half perlite, half turfus, and then I've got some composted fir bark mixed in for good measure. I'm just going to level the soil out with my spoon. Just like that. Spoons work really well for soil leveling. There we go. That looks really good, I think. Yes, indeed. Okay, let's get the trees now and start root pruning them. I've got my seedlings separated. I've got my sweet thorns on this side and my fever trees on this side. And I'm separating them by the trunk color. The fever trees look to have more of a yellowish trunk. And the sweet thorns have sort of a darker brown trunk. So I'm going to begin root pruning now. So most of them I'm just going to prune off the bottom like that. And keep as many of the finer roots as I can. So that one's done. Here's another one that has a double root system. So this one's going to be a little different. I'm going to have to go in and just prune it off and see what happens. Normally I'd probably cut back even further to here, but I don't want to kill the tree, so I'll prune it here, and hopefully some more fibrous roots will develop around this area, and then I can maybe prune these ones back even further later on. Here's one with just a straight tap root, so we'll just take it off there. Again, this is just the first pruning of the roots, so it doesn't have to be perfect right now. We've got lots of chances in the future to improve the root system. So we're kind of going safe rather than sorry at this point in time. Here's another one with double roots. So we'll kind of go here. Here's one with a big taproot. Just take it off. Here's one with a giant big taproot. And again, we'll just take that off. And then we have our 2 little cuttings that have no roots but are still growing. So we'll plant those and hopefully we'll get some roots going on them. The next step in this planting is to get all my rocks arranged. And I've been looking at the pictures of rock formations in the landscapes of Africa. And there seems to be kind of 2 different categories. One is where the rock is just, looks like it's just sitting on top of the soil, like someone picked a rock up and placed it on the soil. And they kind of look out of place, but that's natural. The other is they're kind of formed in a little mound, not a little mound, but a fairly big mound. And the rocks are kind of sunk in with the soil, flat all around it, but there's this little mound with all these rocks sticking out of the ground. So I think I'm going to go with that type of a look, where I have a small hill with rocks on it, and then I may have the odd one placed on top of the soil to kind of give it a bit of both looks, but mainly one mound. So I don't want to build the mound right in the center of the pot. I want to offset it to create a bit of an open space on the one side, and then we'll plant all the trees around. There's a lot of trees. It won't give me the feeling I'm after. This rock formation, I can see it eventually someday as having just the rocks and maybe one tree growing behind it. And that'll be it for the scene. Just very simple. But for now, I'm going to plant all the acacia seedlings around the rocks so it'll look like quite a dense forest, which isn't the look I'm after, but this is just training and we're kind of trying this idea out. So this is sort of the first draft. I found that sometimes the best way to create a rock formation is you just pick the rocks up in your hand and pile them like that, and wherever they lie always looks really natural. So I may do that, or I can go in and, you know, specifically position rocks where I think they would look good. Some of them rocks in some of the landscapes I've been looking at, they kind of fit together like jigsaw puzzles. So, you know, the curve of one rock rests against another. So we could also go for that look. All these rocks are kind of a similar color. They're not exactly the same texture, but they're fairly close. I kind of pick them up at the beach, and I often do that. When I go to the beach, I'll set a goal. I want to collect gray rocks. And then the next time I go, I might collect green rocks. So this time I was collecting reddish or tan colored rocks with this landscape in mind. So I'm going to start arranging this. I don't have to use all these rocks. I'm going to select my best kind of rocks. Here's a rock that's got really nice texture to it. So I'll definitely use that one. I like this one because it's flat on the bottom and it's got some nice texture also. This one's kind of a plain looking rock. It's a little too smooth and rounded like a river stone. So I probably won't use that unless, as I said, it's one just sitting on top of the soil. This one's a nice large rock with all kinds of nice texture and colors to it. This one also is a nice color with textures. This one is sort of in the same category as the one back here. It's very smooth, so I'll leave it back there. This one matches nicely. This one's really nice. The rest are all pretty good. That one's a bit whitish, but I'll put it in. And here's another rounded one that can go back with these ones. I've got my rocks arranged, so I've got kind of a pile. And I think it looks pretty natural, and you can see the rounded shape of the rocks. So let's go in and have a close-up of it. There's a close-up of the rocks. The nice thing about rocks is they look different when they're wet. So let's just wet them and see how it looks. There, it looks quite different now. Okay, now it's time to start planting the trees. Here I go with the planting. I'm going to try and arrange it so the taller trees are up front. I don't want any in front of the rocks, but, you know, beside and behind. So I'll separate all the trees from tallest to smallest. This is my tallest tree, so I'm going to put it right here, I think. And rake out our roots. Arrange them the best we can. Now, acacia trees in nature, acacia trees in nature don't have a big set of surface roots like a maple tree would have. They kind of just go under the ground, and sometimes they have some gnarly roots above the surface where the tree's being torn up by an elephant and that kind of thing. So a radial root base on an acacia tree isn't a priority. It's you might want it on some, and others you might want more of a bizarre kind of root base. I'm just going to place a mound of soil around each tree as I plant it to hold it in place. Like that. I'm sure I'll knock some over as I go, but I'll try and be careful. Planting these trees will take quite a while. It'll, require looking at them from the distance, modifying their position, and that kind of thing to make them look nice. They're planted a little closer together than I would like. In nature, the acacia trees are spaced quite far apart. You do get the odd clumps of them, but generally they're kind of spaced further apart than I've got here. But I have to fit a lot of trees in this planting, so I'll have to place them a little closer. I've got the trees roughly positioned now. I've got some straightening out to do and some, a few modifications. My soil's a little high, and I think I've got to raise the entire rock formation a bit. The idea was to have the rocks look like a hill and the rest of the landscape flat, so I'm going to adjust that now. So I think I'll do that by just raising each rock, putting some more soil underneath it. Maybe even higher. We do have to build this into a hill. Yeah, I think that's looking better. I've got the rocks lifted up now. That's looking better. I still have to level the soil out a bit near the back there and get all my trees straightened out in the soil. I don't want them all absolutely straight, but I don't want them fanning out. I don't like that look. I just want them fairly straight, but some randomness to it. So some aren't quite straight and some are. I think that's getting closer to what I envisioned. More of the flat landscape with the little hill with the rocks and the acacia trees. And as I said, the acacia trees are planted way too dense. In the end, I can see maybe one acacia tree slightly behind the rocks, and that would be it. I don't want it a forest. I just want the rocks and one tree eventually. But this is just in training and trying the ideas out, so I think the next step I should give it a thorough watering. Here I go with the water now. So we'll keep these trees misted regularly. We'll keep the soil at a nice humidity level. We won't overwater it and we won't underwater it. Probably just misting for the first week or two. And hopefully, after that root pruning, they'll all recover and grow. We may lose a couple, who knows. This soil is just sucking this water up. I haven't got much draining out of the drainage holes yet. There it comes now. It would look really good with some moss in between the rocks here. I'll see if I can find any outside. We did get some snow last night, so there's not a lot of moss showing anywhere, but I'll see if I can dig some up and we can plant it around the rocks. I found some moss growing in the cracks of the sidewalk. I don't know how the moss is going to react to coming indoors from winter, if it'll grow or if it'll die or what, but yeah, I'm going to clean the soil off the back of the moss, and then I'll plant it around the pile of rocks here and give sort of a green island in the middle of the bonsai soil. Someday I'll be preparing the whole surface of this soil. Once the roots take hold in this soil, I can get in there and plant moss and sand and stuff around the planting to make it look more realistic. So I'm just placing little pieces of moss around the rocks, pushing it down into the soil so it has good contact. This will give sort of a grassy look to the hill. Just like that. Comes another bit over here. And we want a little bit in here. Yeah, I think come kind of midsummer we'll be doing some more work on this landscape. Planting moss and getting everything looking good. But for now, we'll just put some moss around the rocks. It'll give us a feeling of the potential of it, I guess. I'm going to get my root rake and just push the moss down between the rocks here. Yeah, it's looking more natural already. I've got the moss planted now, so I'm just gonna give it a good watering. I'll give you a 360-degree view of the planting. So there's the rocks. That's all for the acacia planting today. I'm going to start a new feature where I update a tree at the end of each video to show you how it's progressing. So there won't be any work done to the tree. I'm just going to show you what state it's at. Today's update is my little jade tree. This is called a silver dollar jade around here anyway. It's got the kind of round shaped leaves. In the last video, did some pretty major work to it. Cut off a major branch here. Trimmed it back to almost no foliage, and now it's starting to regrow. There's a close-up of it. I'll rotate it around so you can see how it's doing on the other side. That's it for today. Got the acacia trees root pruned, repotted, and ready for the growing season. So Nigel Saunders, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.